Hello and welcome to the April 14th edition of the Bub Reports. I am Rion Charles. This week, we turn our attention to developments in neighboring Barbados, where residents in the community of St. Joseph are up in arms over a hotel development that will impede their access to a historic river and its surrounding environs.
A monumental mistake in permitting these so-called developers to come here and build the ridiculous wall. This is terrible. And this man is allowed, given permission to build this atrocity, this barrier. And not only that, to build a cottage down here and try to stop the good people of St. Joseph from having access not only to the teacup and saucer, but also to Joe's River itself. It is unfair, it is wrong, it is an injustice.
On the east coast of Barbados lies Joe's River and Gully, a green space frequented by many locals for recreational, sporting, and community activities. It also has the historic designation of a location for respite and retreat for enslaved Africans. Joe's River is one of only two above-ground rivers found in Barbados. It has undergone many name changes since the 17th century, including being called a streamlet and the St. Joseph's River after the property owner Joseph Thorne. The river originates in the uplands of Chimborazo, one of the highest points on the island, and makes its way down into the Frizzers Valley before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. The footbridge spans 70 feet over Joe's River and is built on the foundation of a former bridge used by the Barbados Railway, which ceased operation in 1937. In the past, Joe's River Bridge played an integral part in linking Cattle Wash to Bathsheba. Without this bridge, residents would have to endure walking up a few steep hills, maneuvering rocks that they would have to climb, or navigating the beach, trying not to get sand or sea in their shoes. But first, the Bub Report sits down with a trailblazing first-generation Grenadian American music executive who has blazed the trail on the business side of the music industry. He now sits in a prominent leadership role in one of America's multinational entertainment and record label conglomerates, the Warner Music Group. Warner is one of the big three recording companies and the third largest in the global music industry, after Universal Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment. The company owns and operates some of the world's largest and most successful labels, including Elektra Records, Reprise Records, Warner Records, Parlophone Records, formerly owned by EMI, and Atlantic Records. Warner Music Group also owns Warner Chappell Music, one of the world's largest music publishers. We welcome our guests, Barbadian community organizer and retired educator Victor Lewis, and James Antwine, Vice President of Customer Experience at the Warner Music Group. Our host, Dr. Kellon Bub, is here now. Please remember to like and share today's program. This week's edition of the Bub Report was also pre-recorded in advance of today's stream. We thank you for joining us.
Viewers and listeners, welcome to the first segment of this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now, we're happy to be joined by our first guest, Mr. Jameson Antwine, who is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Warner Music Group and co-founder that is, of Lowenberg Productions, which is a New York-based film and television company. He has over 2 decades of media and entertainment experience, leading impactful initiatives in e-commerce, audience development, and digital distribution of esteemed brands such as Castrol, National Car Rental, and Mattel. Additionally, Antwine serves as an adjunct professor at New York University's Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. He has a Master of Business Administration degree with a focus on media management and a Bachelor in Mass Communications and Advertising. Jameson is the son of Antonia and Dudley Antwine of Molinaire and Happy Hill in St. George's, Grenada, respectively. He currently resides in New Jersey with his wife and 2 boys. And we're happy to be joined in our first segment by this very honored and important guest, Mr. Antwine. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I always like to start with gratitude. I'm honored
Yes.
to join you today and honored to be able to share with you and your audience. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us, of course, you have the last name Antwine. That's a very common name in Grenada. So tell us a little bit about your Grenadian heritage and family background.
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, my father is Dudley Antwine. Grew up in Molinaire. My mother is Antonia, again from Happy Hill, and the last name is my grandmother's last name. She had a Miss B, as she's known for people who could go back that far. She had a shop in Molinaire. And that's still there today. And she also had a shop in Grenville. We came to the States when I was 2 years old, but I was born in Grenada. And although I grew up here in the States, both of my parents were very adamant about making sure that they knew that I was Grenadian and that I should be proud of that. And they were both very, very proud of that heritage. And it's something that they instilled in my brother and I from a very young age. We grew up coming back to Grenada during the summers, and they were very clear about making sure that we knew the island, we knew the history, we knew our family, and that we wouldn't be strangers on the island that we were from. And I could tell you today that I could come back to Grenada. I was in Grenada in December. I can go back to Grenada and feel very comfortable moving around to any one of the parishes, any one of the areas, and I'm very, very proud and thankful for my parents for instilling that in me. So that's a little bit about my background and my heritage.
Yeah. Do you drive when you go back to Grenada, or do the roads give you a jolt?
I have, but then there's times where I'm not ashamed to say it, man. I let my dad handle that. So we get chauffeured around. I haven't been that brave yet. So my cousins give me a little grief for that. But the roads are definitely something else. I'm Americanized on that end.
Favorite foods? Are you a culinary master at the Oil Down, for example? You talk about what your parents have instilled in you with respect to your Grenadian heritage. Have they instilled in you the ability to make oil down, sir?
They have instilled a lot. I don't know how much I've continued with, but I can tell you, listen, a beef roti makes me a very, very happy man. So whenever I go back, like clockwork, my parents know to have one waiting for me. My Aunt Paula has a shop in Happy Hill. She always makes me one before I leave. Yes. I go into town and get one. So that is something that's very close to my heart. It makes me happy. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let us get into your interest in music. Was that interest instilled by your parents? What role did they play in inspiring your interest in music? Or is that something you developed at school? How did that work?
A little bit of both. Obviously, your parents influence you a lot. Some of my earliest memories is being in the car with my dad, and he has an 8-track, and we had to finish listening to the 8-track, the Bob Marley 8-track. That's a very fond memory. And my mom always just had this attitude. She always used to say, they both used to say, we don't go in parties to stand up. And that if you were invited to a party, we're going to dance, we're going to fet. And that's something that it applied to music and the love and passion for music. But I've applied that thinking in my professional career, in that if you have a seat at the table, or if you're invited to the party, You are invited there to just stand up and hold up the wall. The DJ is doing his or her job, and you need to do yours as well. So I think that's where my love of music came from. Obviously, my parents are playing soca and calypso, Mighty Sparrow, and Gene and Dinah, and all of these songs in reggae. My mom was a big fond fan of Nat King Cole because her father listened to Nat King Cole. So that music was playing, and was something that I think both of my parents enjoyed. My dad is always whistling and singing songs, and it's just something that was just always, in the house that we enjoyed.
Yeah, no, and of course, back in the, I also grew up in an era in Grenada when country music was actually huge. I'm not sure if your parents also listened to the Kenny Rogerses of the world and things like that. But I also grew up,
John Denver, Kenny
John Denver.
Rogers.
That's right.
All these people. Absolutely. It's funny. I learned later on that for some reason in the States there was a country station that somehow was able to get broadcasted in Grenada. So that
Country Crossroads. I still remember the name of it. Country Crossroads. Yeah.
So I used to ask my dad, how do you know this song? Like, why would you know this song? And it's just so interesting how music can transcend borders and culture, because it is culture. And if it connects to a human emotion, it doesn't matter what you look like, where you are. It speaks to that human emotion.
Very well. So that early interest in music, of course, was spurred in part by the types of music that you grew up listening to, the types of music that your parents grew up listening to, the social spaces in which you occupied.
Right.
Now, did that somehow translate in you deciding that when you wanted to get into college, that music was going to inform what you wanted to study?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the backstory on that. Music was always important to me, and like I said, when my parents went to a party, they danced. So I learned to dance, and I try and make this as succinct as possible. I would dance when I was about 12 or 13 years old with a group of guys because I just noticed, when we dance, we get a lot of attention. And I noticed one thing that my mind was just always programmed to do was some of the other guys could dance, but what I could do is get them organized, right? I could get them organized to say, well, let's come up with a routine, or let's practice after school. And then when one of the girls has a birthday party or something like that, we can go dance at the party. We get some attention, that kind of thing. So I think at a very young age, 12, 13 years old, I'm not thinking about being in the music industry, but I was very much interested in organizing things around performance and entertainment. And a few years later, I had an entrepreneurial bug at 15 and convinced my parents to help me start a t-shirt company. Again, being succinct, the woman who had produced my shirts started bootlegging them, and I found out about them at church of all places. I saw somebody wearing my shirt. That was my entry into the business, because what I had to do from there was I had to go learn about copyrights and trademarks. And I remember going to the library and reading about the business side of the art that I was creating. And from there is when I learned about the music business, because it's talking about copyrights and trademarks and what's called intellectual property. And I was hooked from there. I mean, at that point, I'm also a big fan of hip hop music, about pop music. And the two things came together for me that, wait a minute, I love to dance. I love hip hop. I love R&B. And this is an actual business, and that there's people who work, as a teenager, you just think it's the people in front of the screen, right? And so I just kind of set my mind that when I went to school, I was going to do something related to media. And maybe about my sophomore year is when I said, I'm going to work in the music business. I really became determined, and I said, come hell or high water, I am going to work in this business, because I was so passionate about hip hop and some of the men and women behind it.
Yeah, and you speak of that passion in a podcast that I had the opportunity to listen to, but it your that interest in hip hop and that passion for hip hop led you to work with Def Jam. Did that happen while you were in the undergraduate stage of your academic journey?
The No, that happened after
Okay,
college. Believe it or
after
not, I
college. Okay.
started doing what's called street promotion or guerrilla marketing on campus to get my foot in the door,
Hmm.
and that allowed me to build some connections. I started working at a radio station at night. And after I graduated, although I had a degree in mass communications and in advertising, I didn't go work for an advertising agency. I
Hmm.
continued to work at the radio station, but in the kind of in the advertising department. And
Hmm.
then I started managing a record store because my whole thing was that I wanted to be in the business. So I started managing the record store um, after I graduated, and then I made the decision to move to New York about a year and a half after I graduated from college because I said, hey, that's where the business is. So I need to go to where the business is. So I took a leap of faith and moved
Hmm.
there, and um, I had the opportunity to work at Def Jam. I was still doing street promotions, and eventually I got a job. One of my first jobs was I went on tour with Jay-Z, who was oddly enough, by the grace of God, is one of my favorite artists, and I
Hmm.
had the opportunity to go on tour with him. And when I came back on from tour, I got a more stable job in what's called A&R administration at the
Hmm.
label, and it just gave me a wonderful first step into the door to learn the business, to learn the
Hmm.
logistics, the finance, and the legal
Hmm.
aspects of what the business is all about. So that's how I got into working at Def Jam.
Of Jeff Jam. Talk to us about that tour that you did with Jay-Z. What were some of the biggest takeaways that you got from that tour that sort of enhanced your toolbox and gave you some very important um, tips for how you can get into the music industry or have a further footprint in the music industry?
Sure. As I said, oftentimes when you're growing up, you see the flash. You see the
Hmm.
guys dancing around, you see the money, you see the cars, you see the things that are appealing to the eye.
Yeah.
What I was exposed to on the tour is the work ethic, the attention to detail, the application of their art and what they do. Because I'm not
Hmm.
only on tour with him, but there are other artists joining him on the tour. And what you see that night looks like all very improvisational. It looks like they're just a bunch of guys having fun on the stage. What you see over the course of 2 months is that this is a choreography. This is very, very timed and intentional so that it looks as if it's almost uh, haphazard or it's not organized chaos. I got perspective on all of the men and women, the hundreds of men and women that it takes to make that one person shine,
Hmm.
and how much goes into the day, and that how much you have to apply yourself to really stay on top because
Hmm.
people came to see a show, a good show. They're paying top dollar for that, and you have to deliver. And what it taught me was about work ethic, about the application of your skill set, and to not take anything for granted because um, there are a lot of people who want to be on that stage, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of money that's at stake, and a lot of people's livelihoods that's there.
Hmm.
And I had the opportunity to be part of that. I didn't take it for granted, and I wanted to make sure that once I got that opportunity, that I was going to do my best going forward. And then
Hmm.
that's what I did, and that's what I've carried with me since that experience.
Yeah. What I hear you saying here is that your interest in the music industry happens more on the back end. In other words, the business side of things.
Yes.
You speaking here about intellectual property and copyright, which is a major issue. And going back to that lady in your church that
Yeah.
that you saw that sort of essentially, I don't think she read the commandment that says thou shalt not steal going to
And,
church.
and to be
But
fair, she didn't go to my church. I saw someone with the shirt at my church.
okay,
I
at
don't
your
want
church.
to
Okay.
besmirch
Okay, all
church,
right, that
church.
particular church. Okay, we will not do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But
um,
you're right. She did not. She certainly did not read that commandment
she
at
did
all.
not read that commandment at all, right? Because
But you
how
know what?
many?
Everything happens for a reason, and I took it
Yes,
as a blessing as well. Years later,
yeah,
at the time I'm 15, I didn't understand
of
that,
course,
but
yeah, yeah.
God doesn't make
But
mistakes.
at least at 15, you had the impetus to use that moment as sort of a teachable moment for
Yeah,
yourself, because then you
absolutely.
decided, you know what? Let me go find out what this copyright thing is all about at 15.
Absolutely. And like I said, God doesn't make mistakes. So it's one of those things that and what I've learned in my later stages is something's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And
Yes.
that was kind of the fulcrum of, my understanding of going from a creative to being a creative businessman. There's what you, in order to work in the space, you have to understand both. They
Right.
are part and parcel.
Yeah, yeah. And so what is it about the business aspect of the music industry that drives you?
It just fascinates me. I've learned that I like business. I enjoy um, the idea of people recognizing a need or a gap in services and someone taking the risk to try and meet that need or fill that gap. And I feel like that's the throughput for any business, whether you're selling rotis or you are selling music. Somebody's hungry. I'm going to make the roti, right? People like that. I'm going to make what they like. They like oil down. I'm going to make the oil down. People like music. I'm going to make a certain type of music and fill that gap. So what fascinated me even more, again, working in that space in A&R administration, was being able to see the contracts and being able to see the amount of money or that was being made, and understanding, wow, this is something that more people, especially folks of color, should know, because we are driving it, certainly from a
Yeah.
creative and cultural standpoint. We're the ones on the stage.
Yeah.
But when you go behind the scenes, there's not many of us in the areas of the business where, legal, finance, technology, in those spaces. We're in the creative side, but on the some of the business end where the bottom line hits, I felt like it was important for me to be in that space. I wanted to be close to some of the areas that weren't so sexy, but it's one of the things that was consistent in understanding the business. And that's what drives me and keeps me close to the spaces, the business aspect of it, because it is a $1 billion industry, hip hop and R&B. It is the number one driver of revenue for the major record companies. And we need to understand the business as well as the creative.
Now, of course, on the business, we're talking here about the business side. What other jobs? Of course, you mentioned that you worked in the radio station as well. What specific jobs have you held on the business side of the music industry before rising to your current position, which we will be talking about next?
Right. So I'd say first, my start was in promotions. And it was great because one of my, first mentors, I remember when I got to Def Jam, I told him, well, I have a degree. I came there very I have a degree in mass communications, and I got a rude awakening. My mentor at the time said, if you want to do marketing, you need to understand the streets. And which
You
was,
have to be street smart. I say this to my students all the time. You can't
yeah,
only be book smart.
no, you got to know you. And what he meant by that was you have to understand the people that you are marketing to. So very quickly, he handed me a box of flyers and a box of records, and he said, "I need you to go out to Queens and get busy." I just moved to New York. I couldn't tell you where Queens was versus Staten Island, man. So it was a great first experience, I always have to start with the street team and understanding people and interacting with people. I've worked in radio research where I was responsible for going into nightclubs and looking at what people were reacting to when the songs were played, and then bringing that information back to the radio station and reporting on that. I had the pleasure of managing an actual record store. So I saw from a retail standpoint the effect of somebody hearing a song on the radio and then walking into a venue and saying, "Hey, can I get that song?" And being the person on the end of that was selling it to them. So what I was learning along the way was the different points within the value chain, within the supply chain of music, from promotions to retail to radio. And then when I got to Def Jam working in A&R administration, I got a little further back into the chain where I was learning about how the album was being recorded, who was being paid, how much they were paid, the contractual terms that brought all of those different things together. And then that was A&R administration as a role. And then I went into the digital supply chain as a metadata specialist. So that's probably the most unsexiest job title you can have. But
that sounds like research to me.
It is essentially how the information that you see on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, any of these services, how you actually see that information. So the title of the song, you see Mr. Killer, or you see that song title and you see his name and you see what song is being featured on, and the artwork, how all of that comes together. Well, you have to do that for thousands of records, right? Millions of records that are being released every week. There has to be a way for that artwork to get paired with the information that you're seeing, so that when Dr. Bubs clicks that he wants to listen to Mr. Killer, that song plays and it's aligned with the correct song, and it's not something from a Jamo, right? You don't want those two things getting mixed up. So that's what I did with as a metadata specialist. And then this is a part that I didn't have in my bio, but I left the music industry and I went and traveled around the world for 6 months. And I did travel blogging. That taught me a lot about digital. That taught me a lot about tweeting and blogging and being a content creator, which led me into working into advertising and for brands, the brands that you mentioned at the top of the show, where I was a social media manager. And then, I had the pleasure of working as a strategist and account manager at a tech startup. And then I moved to Warner Music Group about 8.5 years ago, leading audience development. So again, I've been very fortunate and blessed to have been able to make these different transitions, in my career. And that's what's led to me working in my current capacity in customer experience within our e-commerce organization here at Warner.
So let us talk about Warner Group. What drew you to the Warner Music Group in the first place? And of course, you're able to blaze the trail. And that's what the Karen says here. You blaze the trail. I think it's so historic to see someone of color, someone of Afro-Grenadian descent, in such an important executive role in an industry that, especially on the back end, as you just articulated, in which a lot of the people don't look like us. Let's be real about this, right? And that is why representation matters. Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So let us talk about what drew you to that company and the different roles you had before getting to that position that you're now in as VP for customer experience.
What drew me to the opportunity was, remember I said I left at the time I was working for Def Jam and Universal Music Group. Yes. I left, I went and traveled. I went into the advertising and tech space for 5 years. But when I was in advertising and tech, I always kept thinking there's got to be a way for me to bring these two worlds together, right? If you think about it, again, God doesn't make mistakes. I was able to work in the music business, and then I was able to work in advertising. Now, remember, I told you my undergraduate degree was in advertising and mass communications. So I was fortunate enough to do both. But I kept telling myself, how do I bring both of these together? There's an opportunity that there must be a need for what I've been learning on the advertising and tech space at a record company. And the opportunity presented itself where I applied for a role. I had some back and forth, and I landed a job as a director of campaign management here at Warner. And the last 8 years, I've been able to get promoted and grow within the organization, and really service our record labels. So there's many different labels underneath the Warner Music Group, like Atlantic Records, Warner Records, None Such, Rhino. And what my job was to work with individuals at each of those labels and advise them on things like digital marketing, on how to build a community for their artists to speak to, whether that was email marketing or mobile marketing or getting people to their website or e-commerce. So I was able to bring those worlds together. And the last 4 years, I moved into leading a customer service, customer experience group in market research, where we serve the customers who really spend the most money with us in our e-commerce division. And my job is to ensure that things go as they should from design through to delivery, and that we are providing a great experience for our customers and helping them when they haven't, so that there's no delta between what's promised on our stores and what's actually delivered to them. So that's a little background on how I got to where I am here at Warner and what I'm doing today.
And you mentioned the e-commerce aspect of it. Of course, when I think of music, I think of streaming. I think of the amount of streams and streaming downloads.
Right.
I think of the shall we say the wealth of particular artists, the net income,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
How much monies they made from that particular album. That's what I think about. But in the context of e-commerce, how does that work in the industry?
Well, as you said, these artists are essentially brands in the same way that, again, Mattel or National Car Rental or Nike, Cardi B is a brand. Ed Sheeran is a brand. Bruno Mars is a brand. Mr. Killer is a brand. And what we've realized is that we not only can sell music, but there's interest to sell merchandise. There's interest for people to go see them in the show. So again, it's the music business, emphasis on business, in that when you see that people have bought in to the Bub Show, you might say, well, man, we might be able to sell coffee mugs of Dr. Bub. We might be able to sell T-shirts and hoodies of that same thing. So when we talk about e-commerce in the space of music, it is these individual brands that you see as artists almost behaving like small businesses, where they are capitalizing on their intellectual property and selling hoodies, T-shirts, backpacks, mugs, phone cases, and they're selling that through their own e-commerce platforms that we manage on their behalf. So
you manage those platforms at Warner, okay?
Absolutely, we provide that as a service to the artists and handle the heavy lifting, the back end, because there's a lot of infrastructure behind that, where the fan sees the storefront, all right? The fan sees Mr. Killer is selling a hoodie or a T-shirt or that kind of thing. On the back end, we're handling all the payments, we're handling the inventory management, the delivery to the customers' homes, those type of things that, again, not sexy, that, sometimes people necessarily don't want to deal with, but they essentially hire us to do that on their behalf. And along with that comes an element of, you have to have a customer service group to help in the event that things don't go as they should, or our philosophy is that we're ensuring that they do go as they should, so that they don't have a customer service issue. So that's what it means in the context of music.
Okay. Now let us talk about your specific role. And when I saw it, I was like, the vice president, the vice president of, let me pull it up here, the vice president of customer service experience, VP for
Yep.
customer experience, that is.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, does Warner Music have a storefront? Because I, and that's the first thing that crossed my mind anytime I think of customer experience. That's what I think about, that retailer type of customer experience. So talk about what that looks like for on the back end for Warner Group.
Yeah, so it's the role I serve at the company, but everything that we do is in service to our artists who are our clients. So yes, my remit is that I am responsible. It's a global role, so I am responsible for not only the U.S. but also for our business in Europe when it comes to that aspect. And what customer experience is part of it is customer service. It's what you know traditionally. If something goes wrong, you call a group of people, they help you with your issue. When we think about the idea of customer experience, it's broadening that. It's, as I mentioned, it's end to end. It's being involved in servicing the customer before there is an issue, and ensuring that certain things go as they should. So you're thinking about the full experience. When you think about, you walk into a store, the store has a certain smell. The lighting of the store is a certain way. And you notice that when you go to certain places where the lighting is really bright or the lighting is dark, or you hear music playing when you walk into the store. All of that is experience management, right? It's the little things that you're not supposed to notice, but that helps facilitate the sale, right? You walk into a clothing store and they're playing good music. You're feeling good. It makes you want to shop, right? If you go into a place to get a massage, you're there for the massage, but they're playing very tranquil music. All of
ambient sounds,
the ambiance, the you go anywhere, you go to a restaurant and you see a place, you're like, man, I don't want to eat here. The place has to be clean, the furniture, all of these things is experience management. And I wanted to bring that to our storefront. So yes, I work for Warner Music Group, but again, going back, everything that we're doing is in service to those artists and the artist stores. So it's Warner Music, but we're really servicing the artists and the label stores from the e-commerce standpoint, because we have so many different labels and artists, to be clear. So, and my role is to make sure that our team has the tools and the resources that they need in order to be able to do their jobs well. It's to be an advocate internally for the customers, our end customers, and to look for ways where we can optimize the experience to ultimately drive revenue and lower our costs related to customer service, right? Like we want things to go well so that you convert, right? We need you to come to the site, have a great experience so that you can come back. If you go to a restaurant, you have a great experience, the service is great, the food is great, there's a likelihood that you're going to come back. We are applying that same thing in our space, and that is my remit as a team lead in the organization, is to make sure that is not forgotten, and that we are advocating for those customers' needs when they get to our store, pre, during, and post purchase.
Very well. And what would you say, especially in this environment of course, everything is streamed these days.
Yep.
I can go on Amazon Prime and order a particular merchandise, or go on a fan website and order a particular T-shirt, let's say from Rihanna, for example. And so I may not need to interface interpersonally with someone at a store. Yes. What are some of the challenges would you say that the music industry now confronts, especially in this era of artificial intelligence, which is a whole entire conversation that needs to be had, especially in respect of intellectual property. But that aside, the industry is evolving in so many ways. How are you able to keep up with those evolution while also maintaining a particular standard?
Yeah, I have a very good friend of mine who had passed away, but one of the things he always told me was, he said, Jameson, study your craft, and to always be learning. Growing up, education was always very important to both my mother and father. and it's not something that you stop when you leave school. So I apply that at work as well, that things are changing every single day, and that you have to, I tell my sons this, that you have to keep your blade sharp. So as the business is evolving and changing, you have to evolve and change as well. You have to keep current with what customers are expecting, how their behaviors are changing, that they're employing AI, and not looking at AI as a threat, not viewing technology as a threat, but looking at technology as what it is, which is a tool. And that the more you seek to understand the tool, the more you use the tool, the better you are able to harness its capabilities or protect against some of its pitfalls, or at least be aware of some of the perils with it. So with things like AI, it really starts with gaining an understanding of what is it, how does it work, and thinking about how can I use it as a tool, and how could it potentially be used against us in a more pernicious way. So, and that cuts across whether it's, they're going to create songs using AI, or they're going to create imagery or bootleg our stuff using the AI. Now they don't need to come to us. These are all things that there's always been market forces, right? There's always been market forces where there's, there's a threat of competition, there's barriers to entry, there's substitutes in the space, right? Like, just because we're selling the merch doesn't mean that the guy down the street can't just replicate it and sell it on the corner too for cheaper. Right. These things have always been factors in business. It's just that the threat has now evolved to something else, right? If you see it as a threat, you could also say, well, how do we use this technology to enhance our experience, right? How do we use AI to do trend analysis, to do sentiment analysis, so that when Dr. Bub writes in, that we've already anticipated what he might be writing in for? Or how do we use that to respond to our customers faster, right? Those are applications of how you can use technology to help you. So I think that is the attitude that we are trying to adopt, that we've adopted, in that if you see it as a threat, then you will be a victim. If you see it as an opportunity, you would be a beneficiary of what the tool or the service can do. And that's my attitude towards the technology and things. It's just, you have to keep the blade sharp. You have to make sure that you're reading about it and understanding the context of how these things are being developed and how you can use them.
Now, in the context of Grenada, and I would localize this a bit, this current administration, as well as the previous administration, from a policy perspective at least, but even from the perspective of the creators of the merchandise that we sell, the musicians, the artists, the creatives, right. The idea around the creative economy is something that is talked about a lot. Yes. Yeah. And about harnessing and harvesting that potential that is there. There was a creative economy conference that was held last year, and in which attempts are being made to really capitalize on the creative economy. And one of the elements of the creative economy are some of the things we are actually talking about today, which is the business side of things. Now, for a Grenadian who might be listening to you now, a young Grenadian who might be a creative, but who also has an interest in the creative side of things, on the business side of the creative process, what advice would you want to give to Grenada and Grenadians about the opportunities that exist on the entrepreneurial and business side of the creative economy, that young people can really find a niche in?
There are so many roles that are needed in order for the artists and the business to exist. And that if you can't be the promoter, and you can't be the artist, or you can't be the musician, there's opportunities in business development. Somebody needs to build the website. Somebody needs to work on getting the content up on Apple Music and up on Spotify and what have you, and the different services. That is a job. I described it. I did that for 5 years. Someone needs to do the radio promotion. Somebody needs to do the publicity. How do I get on Dr. Bub's show? There are people who work and call Dr. Bub or call the media publications and say, hey, my artist should be on your show, and here's why. Those people are called publicists. There are people who work in business development that say, hey, you know what? I have Happy Hill Records, and I want to, we need to do a partnership with Digicel. There are people whose job is to go to Digicel and say, hey, we have Happy Hill Records. We have these great artists, and we want to do a partnership where, you know, we'll make a Digicel jingle or something like that. So that's a role and function. There is the people who say, you know, we're going to go on tour to all the parishes. Well, somebody's got to organize that, right? Somebody has to organize all the logistics. How are we going to get there? How do we get the equipment there? How do we get to Trinidad to do a show? How do we get to some of the neighboring islands? That's a tour manager. Then you need somebody to manage the money. There's a business manager, right? Not you might be a great calypsonian, you might be a great artist, but you don't know, you're bad with money. So you need somebody who could say, well, all of this money that we're making, we need to make sure that it's organized and that we're reinvesting it back into our stage show, or that we are, because we did the deal with Digicel. Digicel has certain key performance indicators that they need met if we want to keep getting a check from Digicel. So somebody's got to keep that on the rails. So when I talk to young people who want to get into business, it's really widening the aperture of, hey, you might have a skill set that you don't see show up on a stage, but is applicable in the background that you can get compensated for, and compensated very well. And that's needed because as the artist grows, he or she needs a more professional setup if they plan to continue to tour in Asia. If they want to go to the UK or they want to go up to Toronto and perform, if you're going to be doing that as a business, it takes a real team of people to keep that going. You know, you can only do that with you and your homeboy, you and your friend, you know, your mate for so long before it gets to, hey, we need some professionals here to help us. So I didn't even bring up technology, right? We need people that understands all the data and analytics behind, hey, I got this many streams. What does that mean? Where are they streaming? Hey, there's people in Nigeria that's streaming my music, and I'm in Grenada. Well, instead of going to Trinidad, maybe we should organize a tour where we go to Nigeria to perform, because there might be very well more people streaming your music in Sao Paulo, Brazil, than in Trinidad. So
those are bigger markets as well.
And those are bigger markets. So the data and analytics is very important, because you might say, well, I'm going to go perform in Trinidad. I'm going to go perform in St. Vincent, you know, these places where, if you're looking at the data and analytics, you might realize, no, the market is in Nigeria, and maybe we could get somebody to fly us out there, and they will be willing to pay us significantly more than the folks in Trinidad, or vice versa. I'm not knocking any one place, but you get the point. But you need to be looking at the data and analytics to understand that. And all of that is available to us, but you need people who understand that language. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there are different ends to the business that you can do that for multiple artists, right? If you understand the data and analytics, you could say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that you as a service, that we are going to help you organize this. I'm going to be your business manager, and I'm going to do it for all the Calypsonians and handle that. Because maybe one of you guys can't afford me, but if I sign up 10 of you or 5 of you guys, I'll help manage that, right? So those are different roles that we should be thinking about. And because of the internet and technology, just because you're in Grenada doesn't mean that you can't provide that service to an artist in Jamaica or in South Florida or in Colorado or whatnot. If you have the acumen and you've got reliable Wi-Fi and you have a work ethic, you can provide that service to anybody in the world.
Absolutely. Now, 2 final questions, sir, because I do want to respect your time. You're not only an executive, but you're a parent. So,
Yeah.
2 kids.
That's my first job. That's the real job.
That is a
And
real job
husband
right
too.
there, right?
Let
Yeah,
me say that. Those are
yeah.
the
And
first two
husband, that's
jobs.
right. Yeah. So let us talk about one of the things that you mentioned on background is that you are actually producing a documentary on Black-owned records. And as someone who attended an HBCU, that's Howard University, HU,
Yep, you
you know,
know.
for those, okay, are you a bison, sir? What am
No,
I?
no, no. I know enough Bisons that it just
You
comes
know
out
enough
naturally,
bisons, yeah.
man. I'm a bull. I'm a USF bull, so I gotta call out the bull.
Okay,
But
all right,
I got
okay.
a lot of friends and family that's from Howard, man. So
That attended Howard,
much love
sure.
to the Bisons.
Much love, right? And one of the things I really appreciated about my HBCU experience at Howard University was the fact that we were able to see ourselves as people of color, of people of African descent represented. Yeah. Representation really mattered. And as someone who studied media as well, it was all about how inaccurate a lot of those representations were in the mainstream space. But what we were doing to reclaim those problematic representations that we were seeing. And one of the things that you talk about is that you're about to produce a documentary on Black-owned record labels. Now, for me, the most popular one the most historically is, of course, Motown. Yes, of course, you have Black Swan, you have Cash Money, you have Buka, and you have several of these record labels. So talk to me about the thinking behind that documentary that you want to produce.
Yeah, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it on your platform. So I always like
Yes.
to start with gratitude, and I appreciate you for allowing me to talk about it. So
Yes.
my partner and I, Andre Howard, are producing a documentary called The Risk Takers. It's a docu-series, and it's looking at entrepreneurship in the music business and the rise of Black-owned record labels and allies. So not only Black-owned record labels, but record labels that respond that was primarily hip hop and R&B music. So some of these labels were led by white women, and we've had the fortunate opportunity to speak with them. And we one of the very first interviews we did was the first A&R at Motown by a gentleman by the name of Mickey Stevenson. And we've just had I've had the pleasure of interviewing nearly 35 different artists, managers, executives, from DJ Jazzy Jeff to Big Daddy Kane to a lot of luminaries behind the scenes. Corey Robbins, who started Profile Records, who's the person who signed Run DMC back in the day. And we've just been, why it's important for us to tell this story is because Andre and I are both executives in the business. We've been close to some of these people that are behind the scenes, and we've seen their business acumen, we've seen their flaws, we've seen the mistakes they've made and their triumphs. And we wanted that story to be told because, as you said, representation matters. And we needed to be able to tell a story that didn't just display us as entertainers and performers, but also as astute businessmen and women, people that were daring, sometimes cunning, adventurous, and fearless. And we wanted to be able to show young people that you can do all of those things that I just mentioned, and that it is, in fact, a business, and that you do have to think about the legal aspects and finance and the logistics. And you have to have a bit of grit about you. And these are some of the things that we are calling out in the series. We're showcasing the impact of women in the business, and all of these different things. A lot of the people that we've interviewed, they went to Howard, they went to HBCUs, and we're just providing a platform to talk about that as a narrative that you don't often hear about. You hear about the entertaining, you hear about the scandal, the salaciousness. We wanted to bring a very Ken Burns approach to it and bring some gravity to how we talked about ourselves as executives and creatives in the same conversation.
That is so important because these days, of course, what's happening in the industry around. I'm
Yeah,
not going to mention what's happening with that
yeah,
particular artist there, but
yeah.
and that sometimes is the narrative that leads. Of course, in the news business, you studied mass communication. If it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yes.
But there is that other side of the business that is so important for people to know, and I hope that it can serve as a learning tool as well. For upcoming creatives, upcoming people who want to get into the business.
And I think it's important that, I'll say it, listen, whether it's Sean Combs or Russell Simmons, L.A. Reid, these different people that have started companies, they've made contributions, but have made, these people are not infallible, right? They are not perfect people as we're seeing. I think in a way it's important to show both, in that no one's a saint. And that, yes, you can start a company, you can be very successful, but then that doesn't mean that you are Mother Teresa either, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. So
even she was not a saint.
And she wasn't a saint, right? We all have our dark moments, some darker than others, and that. So I'm not making any excuses for any of these actions that these people have been accused of. But I think it is important to also demonstrate to young people that even listen, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, if you study all of their histories, as you learn about Black history, these people are human beings. And oftentimes the thing that we showcase is just their greatness, but they also had flaws. Again, some greater than others. And it's also important to see that like these should be signposts to say, these are things you should avoid. You know, we have to be respectful to women. We have to make sure that we are not being brilliant jerks is a term that they use at Netflix and that our current CEO uses here, that you also have to be, you should strive also to be a decent human being with integrity and be respectful of people. So I just wanted to also put that out there as well, that we're not just showcasing, I think, just one side of it, but that we're showing the whole person and human being and their contributions and their flaws.
Absolutely, we are not perfect beings in any way, shape, or form. And finally, how do you give back to your Grenadian community outside of course your tourist dollars?
Well, listen,
tourist dollars from the diaspora, right?
Remittances
and things like that.
Well,
yes,
I could say could do a better job of that, but my mom is really good at holding my brother and I to the fire about making sure we send a barrel down, and that my parents, again, have always been very involved in the community, both in the States and even now in Grenada. My mom is very involved with the Diabetes Association. My dad was involved down in Dragon Bay and helping that dock to get built out, and just being involved in the community. My mom the parents are both very proud of that Happy Hill RC school. I heard it a million times growing up, that there is a sense of community and giving back. So whether it's the Diabetes Association or doing things at Dragon Bay or just being involved with the community is something that's always been very important that I've seen. And so my parents are always like, hey, if you have something, put it in a barrel, send it down. Hey, there's a backpack drive for the kids at the school. Put some of the clothes there, go buy something there, make sure it goes down. So it's not a huge thing, but I think it
does go a long way.
It goes a long way that, here's something that I might not be using, or like my mom will say, hey, you need to go buy X, Y, and Z and put it in the barrel and send the barrel down and pay for the barrel and make sure it gets down here. So that's one way that we, I'd say I contributed, my brother and I, that she holds us to the fire too, that there's going to be some barrels that go down, and we're going to be the sponsors for it, and I look for opportunities to be able to do more.
But I'm sure after this conversation, Grenadians might be reaching out. I'm sure that your background and your wealth of experience would be amenable towards just providing advice, I'm sure, and encouragement for creatives, not only those on the on the front end of things, but those who want to get into the business aspect of it, which you so articulated beautifully. Mr. Antwine, any final words before we close this segment?
As I said, I always like to start and end with gratitude. I'm honored to be a guest on your show. I know you could have had anyone else on here, but I'm honored, I'm flattered, I'm appreciative of the opportunity, and I just hope your audience receives something from this. And I gotta shout out Happy Hill and Molinaire, my whole family down there. I won't get into naming names, but everybody knows who they are. And I am proud and fortunate to keep and honor my family, honor Grenada, and continue to do great things. So thank you again to you. And I got to shout out my mom as well, and my dad specifically, Antonia and Dudley. So thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Antwine. I'm sure Grenada and your parents, of course, first and foremost, is very proud of the work you're doing. And I'm sure that this conversation certainly was inspiring for me, but I'm sure it would inspire many viewers of this program and those who want to get into that creative space as well. Viewers and listeners, that was Mr. Jameson Antwine, who is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Warner Music Group. We are going to take a quick break and come back for the next segment of the Bub Report. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now, over in Barbados, construction associated with the transformation of the old Edgewater Hotel in Barbados into a world-class beach house and villa has some St. Joseph residents up in arms. They say access to Joes River Gully from the Joes River Bridge will be blocked by 2 concrete columns on either side. Now, hotel and development projects have long been a source of tension in small island developing states. And this issue in Barbados is part of a running series of infractions by developers that threaten public access to spaces used mostly by locals for recreation and community building. Now, in April of 2023, High Court Judge Justice Madam Barbara Cook-Aline granted a temporary injunction to stop the developer of the old Edgewater Hotel property from continuing the construction of 2 concrete columns at the bridge that residents say will block their access to Joes River Gully and an area of significance commonly referred to as the Teacup and Saucer. Now, here to make sense of this ongoing controversy in Barbados is retired teacher and community activist Mr. Victor Lewis. Mr. Lewis, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir. Now, it would appear that instead of having to enjoy your retirement, that as a retired educator, you're now having to fight the government over access to a public space, which I understand has some measure of historic value to the community of St. Joseph and to the people of Barbados.
Yes, certainly, Dr. Bob. Let me say first, thank you for the opportunity to be on your program, and a great hello to all those individuals out there who have a similar interest. I want to begin first, though, with a text from the Bible, Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. And in that text, God is asking us what he requires of us to do. And there are 3 specific things that comes out there. He wants for us to act justly, meaning justice must prevail in all that we do. He wants for us to love mercy. And finally, he wants for us to walk humbly. So I'm no better than you. No, you're no better than I am. So when individuals, come to our country and they seek to engage in development, they must be able to appreciate that we have values. We are people. And it is quite unfortunate when I look across the whole Caribbean now, the type of activities that I'm seeing, that really begs question. The leader of our country, as you would appreciate, Mayor Amor Mortley, would have spoken on the international scene and in so many different dimensions towards, the whole concept of us going to slavery. And now we are talking about reparations because of what we've been subjected to. And it appears to me as though we have a different dimension that is seemingly becoming the fabric of our Caribbean landscape. And that is the whole concept of a neo-colonialistic mentality, where now we are seeing a different dimension to slavery. We are seeing something that is highly questionable, placing us as second-class citizens. When an individual can leave Australia and come to my country, I want to make the type of demands that this particular project that we experience, it really begs the question. Now, you spoke towards the whole idea of the building of the columns. It was the intention of the developers to block us out entirely. The walls, in actual fact, weren't just columns, but they intended to build a wall, and on one side, to build columns, yes, and to erect gates. So the intention was to block us out. Part of the whole proposal also was to utilize that particular area, which is the old train line in Barbados. The old train line is owned by Bajans. It's owned by us. It belonged to Bajans. And this developer is coming to Barbados with the whole view of building a barrier on our land to block us out. It really baffles my mind. Why in 2024 that we have to be subjected to this kind of behavior? when we think of what transpired on location at George River Bridge, we have no difficulty because the actual project seems to be in two-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
The actual renovation of the old Edgewater Hotel, we have no difficulty with that because it's been there for years, and you know, if that's their property, you go and renovate it and do whatever you feel like in there and put up your walls and put up your fences and all the above. That's fine. We have no difficulty with that. But when you come to the George River Bridge that we've been using for all over the years, for cookouts, for hikes, fishing, relaxation, and then teacup and saucer, one of the most beautiful points in Bathsheba. And you would want to come to Barbados to develop what you call a wellness center and to block all Bajans out. Meaning, the intention was that we would no longer have access to teacup and saucer. We will no longer have access to the George River Gully, not via those points. Now, the actual action that we took required of them now to go back to the drawing board.
Before we get to your action, let us talk about that particular Edgewater hotel. You said it was not under renovation. Was that a hotel owned by the state, or was that a hotel owned by a private developer or private hotelier in the past that is now earmarked for redevelopment?
Now, originally it was Tenby House, Tenby. Then it became the Edgewater Hotel. The Edgewater Hotel was, in actual fact, a part of the community. They embraced us. We can go into the hotel, sit down, relax. We can go to the pool, take a bath. When you are leaving the area, you can just walk through the hotel. There was no challenges with respect to access to anywhere on that property for the Edgewater Hotel. Now, we don't have any difficulty with it being sold. But if it is sold, yes, and it now becomes the private property, then one can respect that. We don't have any difficulty with that. Go right ahead. But when you think now that for the George River Gully, which is part of the property, and this is something that we have prescriptive rights to, our children, our grandchildren, our foreparents, you know, we're back generations, would have used that area for full access for all leisure activities. Even for those individuals who would have, you know, gone to work and thing in the adjoining areas would use that area as in an out passage. But although, of course, you would have seen that individuals way back then would have been using the river for washing, etc. We use it for relaxation. We use it for fishing. You know, that's a plot where we go and we have our leisure activities. But when you want to come down and develop that area with a view of not allowing us to have access to it, that is weird.
Also talk about, because in my research, I understand that that place also holds special historic significance. Can you talk about that special historic significance for the descendants of the enslaved in Barbados?
Yes. Now, when we think of the bridge in itself, that is part of what we call the train line. The train line actually ran from Bridgetown, and it would have gone south, come around the east, come on down the East Coast stretch, and it ended somewhere in the Belplain area. That particular bridge is one bridge that the train would have gone over. It is of special significance to us. When we talk about the train line and people mention George River Bridge, there's so many pictures that would have been taken relative to that. And people can take you back and so many things that they would have done in terms of the use of that bridge. It in actual fact allowed you to travel from the western side of the bridge to the eastern side. You walk across the bridge. You know, folks who would be washing, as I said before, they would go along there and enjoy their washing in the river. Folks who want to catch crayfish would go along there, you know, and use the gully and everything and catch their crayfish. You know, in terms of relaxation, that's where you go to relax. So it really means a whole lot to us when we think of the cultural dimension of the fabric of our country. When folks want to roast breadfruit, you go down there and you roast the breadfruit. It's close to the sea. So in actual fact, you can actually interact with the sea in that area and also interact with the river because the proximity is only about 100 yards.
Okay, so it's actually also very close to the beach. But the beach access here is not in question. The access that's in question has to do with the actual river, the adjoining river. Now, not wanting to cut your train of thought, of course, as you said before, the community members they do not have an issue with the renovation or the redevelopment of this particular property. In fact, you said what the value is of the property to the community, especially in respect of tourism. Now, what about, because initially, as I understand it, there was no issue with the construction, because that construction at the time when it was initially conceptualized did not take into account blocking access to the river. Is that accurate to say?
This actual dimension of the construction caught us off guard.
Okay.
One day I was out, planning my fishing, and let me just retract, on what you said earlier.
Yes.
This doesn't impede my retirement. It's a part and a very enjoyable part of my retirement.
Okay, very well.
This,
Okay, yes.
Anytime, So when I look back at what transpired on that day, I was just by the beach and decided I'm going to go and do some fishing. So as normal, I would go into that area to catch some crabs, and then I would go on back to the beach and enjoy my fishing. But when I saw what was going on, I'm a retired teacher, and my specialty is technical education. So when I saw what was going on there, I know that there's something wrong in terms of the activity. The guys who were there in question said to me, I asked them, well, what's going on? They said, well, hey, we have to build up this wall. And these are workers, But what we have to do here is against our conscience. Because what we're doing here is building up walls to block you from entering either on the left side or the right side. We got to build up a wall here. And on this side, we got to build up columns and put on gates. And these guys who were working for a dollar thought within themselves, yes, I have a job. Yes, I'll make money, but this is against our conscience. And I want to commend them because it's wrong. So I said to them, hey, this is something that I certainly will step into. So I put down my fishing lines, went home, got my phone, and came back. Did my video, put it online, and here we are, several videos after, addressing this matter. Now, when we think of Joe's River, Joe's River have the actual ambience, all the activities that transpire there, has what we call a significant therapeutic value. You can go up on top of Teacup and Saucer, sit down, relax, and enjoy the view over to Soup Bowl and Bathsheba.
Why is it called Teacup and Saucer? I'm just curious.
When you actually see the photo of Teacup and Saucer, you have the saucer. So the saucer is turned over and the teacup is on top. So the actual point, because it's a trigonometric point, which is 10 meters above sea level. So apart from that, it's a trigonometric point. But the actual concrete base has the shape of teacup and saucer. So we've given it that name. And of course,
thanks for that lesson.
That we hold on to. Yeah,
okay,
my brother.
Go right ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, so we know the therapeutic value of the Joe's River area. We know the therapeutic value of Bathsheba because the construction now is just not about Joe's River. It is happening now on the east coast of Barbados. If you come on the west coast, and the west coast probably is about maybe 8-10 miles long. If you drive on the west coast, and that is where we call the Gold Coast. When you drive on that west coast, there's about 3 or 4 points that you can actually have access to the sea. where you can actually see the sea on the west coast of Barbados. And that is where the water is nice and calm. When you go to the south coast, there's significant development there. And now they're bringing the action to the east coast. We don't have nothing against development. We welcome it. But we don't want developers who will come here and put us in a point where they think they're giving us something. And coming out of that is a little gardener job, a little maid job. Then these individuals now capitalize on our country. And where do we end up as a people? Taking the scraps.
Now, what about the developers and the government? Were residents consulted about future developments in the area? And did the issue of access to Joes River ever come up? And of course, the second part of that question, and when we speak of government here, of course, the MP for St. Joseph is Attorney General Dale Marshall. He is the Attorney General of the state of Barbados. So one would imagine that as Attorney General, he is, of course, the chief legal advisor to the Mia Mottley government. What role did he play at all, if any, in any of these consultations?
That's a wonderful question, Dr. Matt. What role? Now, it is rather interesting that this is the constituency for St. Joseph. And yet something of that magnitude can happen, and the constituency rep is not aware of it. How could we expect that activity of that level would happen anywhere in Barbados, and the parliamentary representative is not aware? You call that convenient ignorance. Now, when we think of what transpired there, or we think of the project, we think of the complexity of the project, we think of the many things involved. Part of the policies in Barbados, we have what we call town and country planning. That's the old act. Now we have planning and development. And planning and development, it appears to me, mobilize their laws conveniently. Because this activity impacted us in a very significant way. So we know clearly that any impact from a social dimension should have incorporated according to the Planning and Development Act 2019, number 5 of Barbados. It required of the developer to do what we call a social impact study. And in addition to the social impact study, since you are doing this work in the area of the beach, close to the sea, there's also a need for an environmental impact study. So no environmental impact study was done, no social impact study was done, and this is all under the leadership of Mayor Amor Mortley. Now, when we think of the structure of the Planning and Development Department, that committee constitutes 13 members, and the head of that committee is none other than the Prime Minister of Barbados. She is the individual, that person is the individual who makes the ultimate decision as to whether a project can be mobilized or rejected. So who then would have made that decision coming from a billionaire, not a fellow with small change like you and I am, Dr. Bob?
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
This is a big shot.
From Australia,
coming
you said, yes?
Yes, coming out of Australia. And then you can come to Barbados, and a project of that nature is sanctioned, allowed to go. Plans using our land, a barrier on our train line to block us out. Walls on our train line to block us out. But you know, just like we would have discussed earlier, there's always a trick to this. And the trick was that originally the bridge to walk over had deteriorated, collapsed, no use. So you had to walk down in the gully and back up the hill. There was no bridge to cross. So they came with us like Santa Claus to give us a gift. And that gift was the bridge. And all the plastic, smiles and everything would have been part of the whole media. But what was behind all of that was to give us a bridge to cross and then block us out.
Now, I'm just going to piggyback on something you said in your response there in respect of the role of the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, in respect of this project and her role, her overarching role with the Planning and Development Authority. Now, there are a couple issues here. One, you said that you do not know that if in fact they conducted any kind of impact assessment on the project. Yes.
There's something what we call St. Joseph Speaks. Different parishes speak. So, you know, we have St. Joseph, St. John, St. Michael, you know, the whole works. So there's this section there for St. Joseph Speaks. I attended that meeting because I'm a St. Joseph resident. And I asked questions relative to that. Why is it that this project was mobilized and there was no impact study, social or environmental? And
that was that question directed to the Attorney General?
Well, the Attorney General, he was present at that meeting, along with the Prime Minister and the Minister who is responsible for planning and development. So all of them were there.
Okay.
In actual fact,
and what was their response when you challenged them on that?
That's a beautiful question. They mumble all over the place. To some extent, they were somewhat admitting that the actual project, the approval with the project, was not in their administration. It was approved before they came in. Something to that effect. You know.
So in other words, we are not responding. It's sort of a hands-off approach.
Yes, of course. You know, convenient ignorance. You know, and I don't know how they think that, you know, Bajans, that we can just sit down and identify with that kind of logic. Makes no sense. How could you be sitting there? How could you be sitting there as a representative for a parish and a project of that nature? You don't know anything about it. You know, we have elderly folks in the area. You know, Victor, I'm seeing some big trucks coming down, you know, and going on to this project, and they don't know what's going on. Nobody know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I would want to say though, Dr. Bob, is that we can, when we dig a little deeper in the whole process, you know, we realize some very interesting things that would have occurred. It's the manipulation of zones, the manipulations of the actual laws, the whole concept of whether one should mobilize a dimension of the act or not. But the act speaks to one dimension of the act. Section 31A of that Planning and Development Act requires a social impact study and an environmental impact study. Section 4.1 of the same act requires for transparency, and transparency is a wonderful dimension. Transparency says that you and I should know what is going on, but we were left in the dark, and people using our lands to block us up. How unfortunate.
Now, I'm just going to say this about your Prime Minister. Of course, if you can tilt a bit to the...
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Your Prime Minister, Mia Amor Motley, she is considered one of the foremost leaders of the global South. You know, she's considered in the Caribbean as one who speaks truth to power in respect of some of the development challenges and issues confronting not only Barbados, but the people of the global south, including the Caribbean. And she speaks with moral clarity on a lot of those issues. And of course, that is the image and the impression we have of your prime minister outside of Barbados. Yes, and of course, as citizens, of course, this is her second a landslide mandate in parliamentary elections in Barbados. So clearly, she has to be popular in the country as well. But what is it that perhaps we, from the outside looking in, are not seeing that you citizens are seeing in Barbados in respect of issues around transparency and accountability?
The big question here is, what caused the landslide? What caused it? We have two major parties, Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party. So the question is, in terms of doing your research, you need to look first at what caused the landslide. And that's a discussion, again, by itself. Yes. Now, when we think of a landslide victory, 30-0, when we think of, our prime minister on stage, sounds very eloquent, beautiful words, make you jump for joy. Many a times I would go to Florida and I'm in the house, looking out. And let's say 7 o'clock, 7:30, and I look through the window. And outside it's very, very beautiful, lovely, excellent, until I open the door and decide to step out. And I realize how cold it is. So the actual sitting down in the house and having an image of what's on the outside is not the true test. When I immerse myself into it, that is when I came to a real realization. So it is good for us to be sitting out there and to hear our prime minister speak
as a representative of the country.
But it baffles me when we come now to the actual mobilization, when we actually come now to testing the cake, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So when we look at what has transpired on the Maimoli, and let me speak specifically to Jos River, why is it that there was no social impact study? Why is it that there was no environmental impact study? Why is it that permission was given to a developer on our land to build walls to block us out? Why is it that under the bridge, again, developers are allowed to erect a 7-foot fence with a big gate on our land to block us out? Now, when you can think of some person who speaks well, sounds eloquent, all of the above, but when it comes to the hardcore fabric that we have experienced here in Jos River, then one begs question as to the quality of that fabric. All that glitters is not gold.
Okay. So where are we now? Are you going to be seeking redress to the court? I know that last year, April, there was an injunction that you brought against, I believe, was it only the developers or the government as well, to prevent them from continuing the construction of the wall? Did they, obviously, if it was an emergency injunction from the court, I imagine that they had to have stopped construction, but perhaps continued with the construction once the injunction was lifted. It would appear, despite your protests, despite the great Calypsonian Gabby attending your protests, despite that great public outcry, that the government and the developers are saying, no, we're going to go ahead with the project. Where do you go from here? What other redress are you going to seek?
Yeah, that's totally incorrect, Dr. Bob.
Okay.
As you can see on my shirt here, you see, this is Bajan dialect, not about here, meaning not in Barbados.
Yes.
Right? free access 24/7 to George River and Teacup and Saucer. This, in actual fact, we have adopted this chorus from our Prime Minister, who would always say, not bow here. I'm certain when you would have listened to her over several occasions, she would mention that nice little chorus that we have embraced and also run with, not bow here. Now, think about what is happening at this stage. At that location where the injunction was given, we have 24/7 free access to the George River Gully. We have 24/7 free access to Teacup and Saucer. This is our objective. And thus far, we have it. There's just a conclusion to be met now by the government of Barbados. And if, according to the text I would have read before, they would have realized that God expects us to let justice prevail. It didn't prevail on that occasion. God expects us to be humble. And they realize that this is a big mistake. In actual fact, in the actual policies relating to the mobilization of the Planning and Development Act, they talk about presumptive development. Presumptive development. And that presumptive development seems to suggest that I must believe that you will accept something that has not yet been mobilized. So a barrier, don't worry about that. Put it up. Because one thing that was said on that day in question, and I don't know who it came from, I'm still doing my little research. This individual said, if when we build up these walls and the people of Bathsheba, not being specifically the people of Bathsheba, but if the people knock the walls down, build them back up, that is what we call provocative behavior. So the presumption that they can do these things and get away with it is far from question. But as I was saying before, we have achieved our objective in that we have 24/7 free access to George River. We've been there for motorcade on Sunday. We had a lovely time. We had some nice soup and all the above. And we had a wonderful time at the George River Gully. You know, so we have 24/7 free access, and we use the whole concept of safe, because safety is a dimension to it. So where they wanted to send us with respect to the bridge is on the seaward side of the bridge. And of course, our parish, our constituency rep identifies with the fact that getting from the seaward side of the bridge to the landward side of the bridge is dangerous. And he knows that. So we have achieved our objective. It is nothing now that we have any challenges in respect of that dimension of the project. Work has stopped. We can still pass. We've been passing and we will continue to pass as a people. And that will continue for time immemorial.
What about the developer in all of this? Have you heard from the developer, representatives of the developers? Where are you with that?
Representative is a beautiful question, and what I would want individuals to do, all those who are watching this show, I want for you to go to YouTube and type in, "Are you ready? Politically incorrect." Just go to YouTube, type in those words. Are you ready? Politically incorrect. But when you watch that video, you'll get a better understanding on this whole dimension of those individuals involved. I started out with the opinion that it was a developer, but I have to revisit that position. But when you watch that video, I think you would be well educated.
Mr. Lewis, I do want to respect your time, sir. Any closing comments from you, sir? I hope to hear, and of course, in the interest of balance, we will definitely be reaching out to the Planning and Development Authority in Barbados to get a response from them as well in respect of this story. And it's a story that we will be following closely on the Bub Report, because here on the Bub Report, that is something we have covered in Grenada before as well. There were several instances in respect of beach access, and that's still ongoing. 3 projects of which involved Grenada's own Planning and Development Authority, where civil society in Grenada, some elements of civil society, at least those who were not playing politics to get into office, took the Planning and Development Authority into court, seeking redress in respect of how the physical planning, the Planning and Development Authority should be conducting its work around approving and granting approvals for these major development projects, some of which, in the case of Grenada, were constructed on ecologically sensitive land. There is a particular monstrosity that's currently being built in the north of the island in Grenada that's of significant concern to the country, because it was considered once a protected site, but it's also considered a sanctuary for turtle nesting in the north of the island. Now that may be ruined because you're going to be putting up a hotel there that's not even in line with the architectural facade of the country. So those issues is issues that we have been covering here on the Bub Report. So a lot of what you said here, sir, is something that I am. It's like history repeating itself, except in another territory in the Caribbean. So over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
You know, gentrification seems to be part of the fabric of CARICOM, seems to be part of the fabric of the Caribbean community, where they want to put us in the back seat and they remain in the front seat, where they are the CEOs and we are in the kitchen as maids and gardeners. That will not work. Development must respect us, the people. And we got to be able to identify with what Micah chapter 6, verse 8 says. For us to walk justly, justice must prevail. For us to have mercy, and of course, be humble. When you're wrong, say you're wrong. And in this case, the leaders of our country, they're wrong. Just step out and said, I made a mistake. We will have mercy. We will accept. But until such time, not about here.
Not about here. Not about. I can't say that in a Bajan. I would not even pretend. But I like the phrase. Yeah. Not about here. And you said Mia Motley is the one that coined that phrase. Yeah.
Of course. And we love it. And as Sir Roy Trotman would say, we will die on our feet and not our knees.
Yeah.
We're not going to buckle. And I'm expecting all of my Caribbean friends out there to stand strong.
Mr. Lewis, thank you so much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, that's Mr. Victor Lewis. Mr. Victor Lewis, a retired high school teacher in in Barbados, who is now taking the fight to the government and developers. He's part of a consortium of community activists expressing concern over access to the cherished Joes River, which has historic significance to the people of Barbados, especially the descendants of our enslaved African ancestors on the island of Barbados. They fear that they would be losing access to that cherished river because of an ongoing development that may block access to it. It's a hotel development that may block access, permanent access to it in the island of Barbados. Of course, that has been a long-running issue that has been happening since last year. There was an injunction filed in this matter. And of course, we are going to watch the space to see how the new Edgewater Hotel development area would unfold, and whether or not the citizenry of Barbados would be losing access to that. So on behalf of the producers of the Bub Report, I am your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. We thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Bub Report. Until next week, we will see you again. Take care now. Bye-bye.